My family chose my abuser at the custody hearing, so when they got evicted, I let them sleep in their car. I nearly dropped my phone when I picked it up and heard, "Marlo, baby, it's your sister." I hadn't heard Priya's voice in 5 years. Not since she sat in a courtroom and told a judge I was an unstable woman inventing stories about a good man, while my wrist was still in a brace under my sleeve. I didn't say anything for a long time because my brain couldn't figure out why the woman who'd handed my ex-husband ammunition to take my own daughter from me was calling me baby like we'd talked last Tuesday. She kept talking because Priya has never been able to sit inside a silence. She filled the air with, "I know it's been forever," and "Mom and I have been wanting to call you for ages." And I'm standing in my kitchen thinking, yeah, 5 years is forever. That's one way to describe what you all did. I finally found my voice and it came out flat. Nothing like the woman who used to call her crying, begging her to take it back. "What do you want?" I said. She made this little wounded sound, like I'd reached through the phone and slapped her, completely skipping over the fact that she hadn't checked whether I was alive since the day the custody ruling came down. "We're in a tight spot," she said, and I could hear my mother in the background coaching her, the way she's coached everyone in our family their whole lives. "Mom's apartment, the building got sold. They're tearing it down for condos. We've got till the end of the month and then we've got nowhere. We just need a place to land. Just for a little while, just till we sort something out." She said it the way you'd ask to borrow a phone charger, a casual little request to the sister she'd helped bury. I laughed, not because anything was funny, but because my body didn't have another response ready. "You're joking," I said, but I knew she wasn't. Priya doesn't joke. She thinks reading the captions on a meme out loud is comedy. "We're family," she said. And that word sat down on my chest like a stone. Family. Really. That's what we're calling this. Family is the people who show up for you, who believe you, who don't look at your daughter and decide she's worth trading for the approval of a man who fixed mom's gutters one summer and always laughed at dad's jokes. "No," I said. And it came out easy, easier than I expected. 5 years ago, I couldn't say no to a telemarketer. I'd apologize to a door I bumped into. But I'd spent 5 years in therapy learning that no is a whole sentence, and that I don't owe a reason to people who never once asked me a question. The silence on the line was loud. I could picture Priya's face, that pinched look she gets when the world refuses to arrange itself for her. "Excuse me?" she finally said. And there it was, the exact tone Mom uses. The one that used to send me running to fix whatever I'd done. "No," I said. "You can't stay with me." My mother grabbed the phone then. I heard the fumble, then her voice, lower, harder, the voice of a woman who has bent every room she's ever walked into. "Now you listen to me, Marlo. I don't know what story you've been telling yourself, but your sister and I are about to be on the street. We are your blood. You do not turn your back on your blood." The nerve. The sheer nerve of this woman lecturing me about turning your back, when she sat in a witness chair and told a courtroom her granddaughter would be safer with Theo. When she described me as paranoid. When she said, under oath, that I had a habit of overreacting. "You turned your back on me first," I said. My voice didn't shake. I didn't give them anything to use. "You chose Theo. You testified against me. You watched me lose my daughter and you helped it happen. So no. You don't get to call me family now that you need a couch." My mother was crying now. I could hear it. The theatrical kind. The kind that used to make me feel like a criminal for having feelings. "We made mistakes," she wailed. "We know that now. Please, Marlo. We have nowhere to go." And for 1 second, one single second, something soft moved in my chest. The ghost of the girl I used to be. The one who'd say yes just to make the crying stop. Then I remembered standing in an empty apartment the night the ruling came down, holding my daughter's stuffed rabbit alone while they hosted Theo for Sunday dinner. And the softness died as fast as it came. "That sounds like a problem the two of you made," I said. "Don't call this number again." I hung up. I sat in the quiet of my own apartment, the one I pay for with my own paycheck, the life I built out of the rubble of the one they helped torch. My hands were steady. My heart was calm, and I knew, with total certainty, that this wasn't over. I was right. I'd barely finished my coffee the next morning when the phone started up again, and it didn't stop for 3 weeks. My family has never understood the word boundary. They've never had to respect one, so why would they recognize one? They heard "don't call this number again" as "please call this number until I cave." The first days were just calls. Priya in the mornings with her wounded little voice, my mother in the evenings with her stern, disappointed one. Voicemails that swung from guilt trips to barely disguised threats about what kind of woman abandons her own family. I listened to exactly one. Heard my mother say, "I don't know what we did to deserve a daughter like you," and deleted the rest without pressing play. When calls didn't crack me, the texts came. My mother discovered emojis in her 60s, apparently, because my screen lit up with crying faces and broken hearts and folded praying hands, attached to paragraphs about how she lies awake knowing her daughter hates her. She actually wrote hates. Rich. Coming from the woman who watched me unravel and threw her weight behind the man pulling the thread. We're down to our last few $100s, one text said. Your sister had to sell her car, said another. As if I was supposed to ache for them, when the first year after the hearing, I ate cereal for dinner 4 nights a week because every dollar I had went to a lawyer trying to get my daughter back. I didn't answer a single one. I watched my phone light up and I kept living, because I'd learned a long time ago that engaging only hands them more rope. Then the relatives started. My Aunt Carol called on a Wednesday and I picked up because I used to like Carol. Or I did, until she opened her mouth. Marlo, sweetheart, I just hung up with your mother and she is in pieces. I should have known. The second her name lit up the screen, I should have known it wasn't a friendly call. My family had run out of their own ammunition, so they were drafting an army. She says you won't take them in. Carol went on, her voice soaked in that fake concern that runs in our blood like a hereditary disease. And honey, I just cannot understand how you could be so cold to your own mother when she's about to be homeless. I took a slow breath. The old Marlo would have crumbled, would have started explaining, justifying, apologizing for the crime of protecting herself. But I'm not the old Marlo. Did she tell you why we haven't spoken in 5 years? I asked. Silence. Did she tell you about Theo? About what he did to me? About how she sat in a courtroom and helped him take my daughter? More silence. Then Carol, uncomfortable now. Well, she mentioned there'd been a falling out over your divorce, but I'm sure if you all just sat down. I hung up on her too. After that, it was a cousin. Then my Uncle Ray. Then my mother's old church friend, a woman I'd met maybe twice, who somehow had my number and called only to inform me I was breaking my mother's heart. Every one of them ran the same script. Your family's struggling. Blood is blood. You have to let the past go. Holding grudges will poison you. Not one of them asked me what actually happened. Not one wanted my side. They just called to deliver my mother's message in the thin wrapping paper of concern. So I stopped answering anything that wasn't already in my contacts. My family had turned every relative I had into a foot soldier, and every soldier was armed with guilt and zero context. 2 weeks into the siege, I came home to find Priya sitting on the steps of my building. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Her hair grayer at the part, her jacket wrinkled in a way the Priya I grew up with would have died before allowing. For half a second, something twisted in me, some childhood reflex that wanted to run to my big sister and fix whatever was wrong. Then she stood up, brushed off her jeans like she had all the time in the world, and said, with a little triumphant smile, I knew you'd have to come home sometime. The twist vanished. You need to leave, I said. I just want to talk, she said. Sister to sister. You owe me that much. I actually stopped walking, because the audacity deserved acknowledgement. I don't owe you anything, I said, and my voice held steady even though my pulse was going. You lost the right to ask me for anything the day you told a judge I was making it all up. Her face folded into the wounded look she's been perfecting her whole life. I walked past her and into my building without looking back. She came the next day, and the day after, sometimes with my mother, sometimes alone, always the same script about blood and forgiveness and how they've changed. My mother tried the stern routine, standing on the sidewalk with her arms crossed like she was waiting up for a teenager past curfew. This is shameful, Marlo, she called when she saw me coming. I raised you, I gave you everything, and this is how you treat me. I went past her without eye contact and she grabbed my arm. Actually grabbed it. I spun around so fast she let go like she'd touched a stove. Put your hands on me again and I call the police, I said. And my voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded like someone who'd survived something and had no intention of repeating it. She stood there sputtering about respect and gratitude while I went inside and bolted the door. Then they found out where I worked. I still don't know how. Maybe one of the relatives. Maybe they followed me one morning. But I walked into the clinic where I do intake on a Thursday and found my mother in the waiting room, chatting up the front desk like an old friend. There she is, she announced, loud enough for the whole room. My daughter. I was just telling this lovely young woman how proud I am of everything Marlo's done. Every patient in that waiting room turned to look. My face went hot, rage and humiliation in one wave. I crossed the floor and leaned in close so only she could hear. You need to leave. Right now. Her smile didn't move, but her eyes went to flint. I just wanted to see where my own daughter works, she said, still loud, still performing. Is that a crime? If you're not gone in 1 minute, I said, quiet and even, I'm calling security to walk you out, and then I'm filing for a restraining order. The smile finally dropped. She looked at me with something close to shock, the first flicker of understanding that I wasn't the soft thing she remembered. Then she gathered her purse and walked out without another word, leaving me standing in my own workplace feeling like I'd just survived a battle no one around me knew was happening. My hands shook at my desk, but I didn't cry. I was done crying over people who hadn't earned a single tear. I know what you're thinking. What could be so bad that I'd let my own mother and sister sleep in a car before I'd help them? What did Theo do? Why can't I just forgive and move on like everyone keeps telling me to? I get it. From the outside, this looks cold. But you don't know what I lived through, and you don't know what they watched and chose not to see. So let me tell you about my marriage. I met Theo at the hospital where I'd just started as an intake coordinator. He was a pharmaceutical rep, the kind of man who walked into a room and rearranged the temperature. Tall, easy smile, a laugh that made you feel chosen. I was 26 and proud of myself for finally having a real job, a real apartment, a real life. And here was this polished man finding reasons to linger at my desk. You look like someone counting the minutes till lunch, he said the first day. Is it that obvious? I asked. Only to a fellow clock watcher, he said. I'm Theo. He asked for my number before he left the building. By the end of that week, he'd sent flowers to the front desk, with a card that said, I just wanted your coworkers to be jealous. I told myself that was charming. The first 6 months were a fairy tale. Theo remembered everything. The name of the tea I liked. The fact that my grandmother used to sing me a specific old song. He found a recording of that song and played it the first time he cooked me dinner, watching my face when I recognized it. When I mentioned a band I'd loved in college, he had tickets to their reunion show within a week. I can't believe you did all this, I said. I'd do anything to see you look like that, he said. He met my family inside 2 months and won them in an afternoon. He brought my mother peonies and told her they were her color. He fixed a leaky faucet at her place without being asked. He sat with Priya's husband and talked about fishing for an hour. He's a keeper, Marlo, my mother said, gripping my hand with tears in her eyes like I'd finally done something right. Priya hugged me in the kitchen and whispered, Don't you dare mess this up. Everyone loved him. My friends loved him. I loved him so much it frightened me, this sense that I'd somehow won a prize and was just waiting to be told there'd been a mistake. The first time something felt wrong was about 8 months in. We were at dinner and I laughed at something the waiter said. Just a dumb line about the soup. Nothing in it. But when the waiter walked off, Theo went quiet. The kind of quiet that fills a whole room. He didn't speak again until we were in the car. You really enjoyed that, he said. Enjoyed what? His hands tightened on the wheel. Don't play stupid. The waiter. The way you lit up for him. I tried to explain I was just being polite. He shook his head slowly. You have no idea how you come across. How desperate you look throwing yourself at any man who glances your way. My eyes stung. That's not fair. I wasn't throwing myself at anyone. He pulled the car over so hard I gasped. Then he turned and his whole face changed, soft and broken. I'm sorry. I just love you so much that the thought of anyone else getting your smile makes me insane. You're everything to me. Losing you would kill me. I told myself jealousy was just love that cared too much. I told myself I was lucky. After that, the comments came faster. You're not wearing that out, are you? That lipstick makes you look cheap. Do you have to laugh like that? People are staring. He'd say it casually, like he was doing me a favor by pointing out my flaws, and I started shaving myself down to fit him. Brighter clothes went to the back of the closet. Bold colors became beige. I laughed quieter, talked less, became less. My friends asked why I never came out anymore, and I made excuses because the truth was Theo didn't like them. They're jealous of us, he said. They want to break us up. Can't you see it? One by one, they stopped calling, and I told myself that was fine, because I had Theo, and he was all I needed. We married after 2 years. My parents paid because Theo said it was tradition, and who was I to argue with tradition? I walked toward a man I thought hung the moon, completely blind to the cage I was stepping into. The real Theo came out in the first year of marriage, like he'd finally taken off a costume he was tired of wearing. The occasional criticism became constant. This place is a disaster. What do you even do all day? You call this dinner. My mother would be embarrassed. Nothing I did was right. I'd hear his key in the door and feel my whole body lock up, scanning his face to learn what kind of night it would be. The first time he hit me, it was over laundry. I'd shrunk a shirt of his. That's it. He held it up, stared at me, and the back of his hand caught my cheek before I even saw him move. I stood in our bedroom with my face wringing, and he looked at me with disgust and said, Look what you made me do. I didn't want to do that. You made me. Then he left, and came back the next morning with flowers and a speech. Work stress. He'd never done it before. It would never happen again. He loved me. He hated himself. I believed him, because the alternative was admitting my whole life had become a lie. It happened again 2 weeks later. Then it stopped being something I counted. I learned his moods like weather. Learned which words to never say. Learned to make myself so small he might forget I was in the room. I flinched when he reached for a shelf. I apologized for breathing. Then I got pregnant, and for a few months he was almost gentle, and I let myself hope the baby would fix him. My daughter Ivy was born on a snowy night, and for the first time in years, I felt something other than fear. He held her and cried, and I thought, this is it. This is the turn. It lasted about 4 months. Then a crying baby became one more thing I'd failed to manage. He'd snap at me to shut her up. Once he threw a bottle past my head hard enough to crack the wall. And I realized with a cold, clear horror that the cage now had 2 people in it, and one of them couldn't run. I tried to tell my mother once, about a year into the marriage before Ivy. I showed up with a bruise I hadn't quite covered. She tilted my chin to the light. What happened to your face? For one desperate second, I thought, this is it. Someone is finally going to see. Theo hit me, I said. Her face did this complicated thing, somewhere between discomfort and disbelief. And then she asked the question that broke me down the middle. Not are you okay, not we need to get you out. What did you do? Nothing, Mom. I didn't do anything. He just gets angry and I never know what sets him off and I'm scared. She patted my hand like I was a child overreacting to a scraped knee. Marriage is hard work, sweetheart. You have to learn to manage a man's moods. Theo is a good provider. He's wonderful at family dinners. I'm sure if you tried harder, you could keep the peace. I left her house lonelier than I'd ever been. Priya was no better. She caught me crying in a bathroom at Thanksgiving once, and I told her the truth. All of it. She looked at me for a long moment and said, Marlo, Theo is the best thing that ever happened to this family. He's so good to Mom. Are you sure you're not, blowing things up? You always did have a flair for drama. Then she fixed her lipstick and walked back out to sit beside him at the table. That's when I understood I was on my own. The night I finally left, Ivy was too. He'd thrown me into the edge of the kitchen counter hard enough to fracture my wrist, and Ivy was screaming in her high chair watching it happen. Something in me, some last thread, snapped. Not in despair, in clarity. I waited until he passed out. I packed one bag and the baby, and I walked out the front door at 3 a.m. with a broken wrist and nowhere to go. I drove to my mother's. Even after everything. Even after the bruise she ignored. Some stupid part of me still believed she'd help when it truly mattered. I stood on her porch crying so hard I could barely hold Ivy, my wrist screaming. My mother opened the door in her robe, squinted at the empty driveway. Marlo, it's 3 a.m. Where's Theo? Does he know you took the baby? I left him, I sobbed. He broke my wrist tonight. Ivy saw it. Mom, please, I need somewhere to go. She sighed. That heavy, disappointed sigh. You can't just run off with a man's child in the middle of the night over a fight. It wasn't a fight. He's been hurting me for years. Please, just let me in. Priya appeared behind her in pajamas. My mother turned to her and said, She left Theo, took Ivy, and ran. Priya rubbed her eyes and said the thing I will hear until I die. God, Marlo, always so dramatic. Theo would never. You're going to confuse that baby dragging her around at night. Go home. I lifted my sleeve, showed them my swelling wrist, already turning colors. Look what he did. My mother looked at it a long moment, then back at my face. I'm sure it was an accident. Go home and work it out like an adult. Then she stepped back and shut the door. I heard the deadbolt slide. I heard their footsteps go back up the stairs. And I stood in the dark holding my daughter, understanding for the first time that I had never had a family who loved me. I had a family that loved the idea of me. The version that stayed quiet and married and never made things awkward. It got worse than a closed door. Theo had money for lawyers. I had a public defender's worth of nothing, and a family who would not back me up. When the custody fight came, Theo's attorney painted me as an unstable woman who'd kidnapped a child in the night, and my own mother and my own sister took the stand and helped him do it. My mother told the court I'd always been prone to exaggeration. Priya told the court she had never once seen Theo be anything but gentle, and that she worried about Ivy's stability, given Marlo's emotional state. The judge heard a frightened mother on one side and a polished man with 2 upstanding relatives vouching for him on the other. I lost primary custody. I got every other weekend and a Wednesday dinner. He got my daughter, 4 nights out of 7, in the house where he'd broken my wrist. I walked out of that courthouse, and my family walked out behind Theo, and my mother actually said to him in the hallway, where I could hear, We're so sorry about all this, Theo. She's not herself. That is the moment I stopped hoping anyone would save me. Now you understand why I can't let them back in. They didn't just doubt me. They took the stand against me. They handed my abuser my own child. And now they need my spare room. I've been waiting, in some quiet corner of myself, for the day they'd come crawling back. I just didn't expect it to feel this clean. 3 days after the scene at my clinic, my mother and Priya showed up at my building again. But this time, something was different. They weren't wearing the entitled faces I'd gotten used to. They looked smaller, defeated, like 2 people who'd finally run out of moves. I almost walked past them like every other time. Then my mother said something that stopped me cold. "We know about Renata," she said, and her voice cracked on the name. "Theo's wife, the new one. She found us." I turned around slowly. Renata was a name I'd heard maybe twice. Theo had remarried about 2 years after our divorce. I'd made it my business to know as little about his life as I could survive on. "What does that have to do with anything?" I said. Priya cleared her throat, the way she does when something is about to cost her. "She showed us things, Marlo." "What things?" "Texts," my mother whispered, and she couldn't meet my eyes. "Things he wrote to his friends. Photos he kept. Things he bragged about doing to you. Things he started doing to her." Priya was crying now, not the theatrical kind. Quiet tears, no performance under them. "We didn't know how bad it was. I swear to you, we didn't know." I stood on the sidewalk and felt the ground move, because this was not the conversation I'd braced for. I'd prepared for more guilt, more manipulation, more of the same. I had not prepared for them to actually admit they were wrong. "You didn't know," I repeated, flat and hard. "You didn't know when I showed up at Mom's with a bruise on my face and told you he hit me. You didn't know when I stood on that porch with a broken wrist holding my screaming daughter. You didn't know when you sat in a witness chair, both of you, and told a judge I was making it up." Priya flinched like I'd struck her. "Renata found you," I said. "A stranger. A stranger had to show you proof because your own daughter's word, my word, the word of the woman you raised, wasn't worth as much as a man's nice handshake." "She showed us everything," my mother said, desperate, like the evidence somehow cleaned the stain off them. "Photos he kept like trophies. Texts where he called you names I won't say out loud and laughed about having everyone fooled. She said she'd been trying to find you. She wanted to warn you. She wanted to say she's sorry for the both of you." I felt sick. The thought of those photos existing, of my family seeing me at my most broken, made my skin crawl. "So a stranger had to hand you proof," I said. "Because your own daughter wasn't enough. I told you. I showed you. I begged you. And you put on your good clothes and testified against me." "We were wrong," Priya said, and the words sounded like they hurt coming out. "About all of it. We believed him because believing him was easier. Believing you meant admitting we'd helped him win." "You didn't just believe him," I said, and my voice was rising now. 5 years of it finding the door. "You took my daughter and handed her to the man who broke my wrist in front of her. Do you understand what you did? He had her 4 nights a week in that house, for years, because the two of you got up on a stand and helped him. The silence after that was total. They stood there stripped of every defense they'd ever owned. For the first time in my life, my mother had nothing to say. "We know the truth now," she finally managed, "and we're sorry. We are so sorry." I laughed, and it wasn't kind. "You're sorry now that you're about to be homeless. Where was your sorry 5 years ago? Where was it when I was eating cereal for dinner to afford a lawyer who couldn't undo what you did? Where was your sorry every Christmas you spent with Theo and my daughter while I sat in an empty apartment?" Priya reached for me. I stepped back before she could touch me. "Don't," I said. "You don't get to touch me. You lost that the day you closed the door on a woman holding a baby and a broken wrist." My mother tried once more. "We can't change the past, but we can try to make it right. Give us a chance, Marlo." I looked at her. The woman who taught me to swallow my own instincts so a man could feel respected in his house. I looked at Priya, who'd told a judge I was unstable so she wouldn't have to lose the brother-in-law who fixed Mom's gutters. I looked at both of them finally saying every word I'd needed 5 years ago, and I felt absolutely nothing. "No," I said, and it came out easy. "You don't get a second chance. You had your chances. Every bruise I showed you, every time I flinched, every excuse I made for why I couldn't come to dinner. Those were your chances. You blew everyone." I turned and walked into my building. I could hear my mother crying behind me. I could hear Priya calling my name. I didn't stop. I'd spent too many years stopping for people who never stopped for me. The elevator doors closed, and I finally let myself breathe. My hands were shaking. My heart was steady. I should have known an apology wasn't the end. My family has never been able to take no for an answer. Their next move is the one that put me on the phone with 911. And this time, I wasn't the only one watching. A week went by, and nothing. I let myself believe they'd finally found somewhere else. Crawled back to one of the relatives they'd weaponized, maybe. Accepted that I wasn't going to fold. I was walking home from the clinic when I turned onto my street and went cold. There was a light on in my apartment window. I stopped on the sidewalk and stared at it. I never leave a light on. Never. Not since those first months after the divorce, when every dollar mattered and a wasted bulb felt like setting money on fire. My feet wouldn't move. I stood there trying to invent another explanation. A timer I'd forgotten. A reflection. Anything but the thing I already knew. My neighbor Delia was on the shared landing, deadheading the plants she kept out there. A kind woman in her 70s who'd lived across from me for 4 years and always asked how my ivy was. She saw me before I could move, and her face told me everything. "Marlo, honey," she said, careful in a way that turned my stomach. "There are people in your apartment. They said they were your mother and sister. I saw them go in through the back window about an hour ago. I wasn't sure if I should call anyone." I thanked her, but the words came out hollow. I couldn't make a full sentence. I just put one foot in front of the other until I was standing outside my own door, hearing voices on the other side, my mother's laugh, the clink of my dishes, my television playing some show I never watch, the smell of something cooking on my stove. I unlocked the door and stepped into a nightmare. They'd made themselves at home. That's the only way to say it. Priya was on my couch, shoes off, feet on my coffee table, a soda from my fridge in her hand, watching my TV like she'd signed the lease. My mother was at my stove stirring a pot. When she heard the door, she turned with a bright hostess smile, like I was a guest arriving late to her party. "There's my girl," she said, setting down the spoon. "I'm making us all some dinner. You really need to do a proper grocery run, sweetheart. There's nothing in here. I found some rice and a can of beans in the back. It's nearly ready. Perfect timing." I couldn't speak. I stood in my own doorway looking at two people who had broken into my home and were behaving like this was the most natural thing in the world. "How did you get in here?" I finally got out, and my voice came strangled and wrong. Priya didn't look away from the TV. "Back window," she said, sipping my soda. "You really should get a better latch. Anybody could get in." "That window was locked. I check it every single night." "Latches get loose," my mother said with a little shrug, like breaking into a home was a small thing we'd laugh about someday. "We didn't have a choice, Marlo. You wouldn't answer the door. You wouldn't take a call. The building's already locked us out. We had nowhere. What were we supposed to do? Sleep in the car?" "Yes," I said, and my voice climbed. "That is exactly what you were supposed to do, because this is my home. You don't live here. You weren't invited. You broke in." Priya finally turned and had the gall to look annoyed. "Listen to yourself. We're your family. This isn't breaking in. This is family looking out for each other." "Get out," I said, quiet and hard. "Get your shoes and get out of my apartment." My mother turned off the burner and wiped her hands on my dish towel, like the lady of the house interrupted at her cooking. "Marlo, please. We have nowhere to go. Your sister's been sleeping in a car for 3 nights. My back is ruined. You can't throw us into the street. Watch me." I pulled out my phone. "You have 1 minute to leave before I call the police." Priya set down the soda and stood, and for a second I thought she'd comply. Instead, she came toward me with the face she used to make when we were kids, and she was about to tell on me. "You'd really do that," she said, low. "Call the cops on your own mother. Have her dragged out in handcuffs. You broke into my home. We're family." She said it like a spell that erased everything. Family doesn't call the police on family. Family figures it out. "We stopped being family," I said. "The day you sat in a courtroom and helped a judge give my daughter to the man who broke my wrist. You don't get to play that card now." My mother rushed over and grabbed the arm holding my phone. Actually grabbed it. "Think about how this looks. Your own family arrested. What will people say? What kind of daughter does this?" "I don't care what anyone says." I yanked my arm free and hit call. "You broke in and you won't leave. That's trespassing." My mother started up the theatrical sobs. "After everything we sacrificed for you. The best years of our lives. And this is the thanks. You want me to list what you did? Because I've got 5 years of list." Then the dispatcher answered, and I had to focus on explaining that there were people inside my apartment who'd entered through a window and refused to leave. Yes, I knew them. Yes, they were my mother and sister. No, they did not have permission. No, they did not have a key. Please send someone. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. My mother went back to her pot like nothing was happening. Priya channel surfed and complained about my cable. "We raised you," she said at one point, not even looking at me. "Fed you, clothed you, and this is what we get." "You're not being arrested," I said. "You're being removed from my home. There's a difference." Then the knock came. 2 officers, a man and a woman with the tired look cops get at a family call. I explained everything as calmly as I could, and my family switched into performance mode like a light flicking on. My mother dabbed her eyes and talked about wanting to reconnect with her daughter after a silly misunderstanding. Priya shook the male officer's hand and said something about how emotional the women in our family get. How this was just a squabble blown out of proportion. I watched them work the room the way they'd worked every family gathering of my life. I watched the officers' faces soften. The officers stepped aside, conferred, and then the female officer said the words that turned my blood to ice. "Ma'am, since they're your immediate family, and they've already established themselves in the residence, this is going to be a civil matter." I stared at her. "They broke in through my window. My sister admitted it." I understand. And you can absolutely file a report for the break-in. But as far as removing them tonight, they're claiming you invited them and there's a dispute about how long. We can't forcibly remove someone over a verbal disagreement about a timeline. That goes through the courts. They are lying. They literally told me they broke in because I wouldn't let them stay. How is that an invited guest? The male officer shifted, uncomfortable. It becomes a he said, she said. Your best path is the formal eviction process. File with the court, get a hearing, and if the judge rules for you, then we can remove them. Behind me, Priya let out this soft, satisfied little chuckle that made me want to throw the pot at her head. Looks like we're staying after all, she said, dropping back onto my couch and putting her feet up. Family helps family, Marlo. Guess you're stuck with us. The officers handed me a sheet about filing for eviction and left. And I stood in my own living room feeling like the floor had vanished. They'd broken into my home and the law was telling me there was nothing I could do tonight. Now then, my mother said from the stove, like the last half hour hadn't happened. Dinner's done. Marlo, do you have any hot sauce? I looked everywhere. You really do need to keep a fuller pantry. I walked out of my own apartment because I couldn't breathe inside it. Delia was still on the landing. She'd watched all of it, the cops arriving and leaving, my family staying put. I could tell from her face she'd heard enough through the walls to understand. Are you all right, honey? She asked. And the concern was real, not the counterfeit kind my family specialized in. No, I said, and my voice cracked for the first time all day. No, I'm really not. She put a warm hand on my arm. I saw the whole thing. I told the officers, but they said it didn't matter without proof of forced entry. But I know what I saw, Marlo. I watched 2 people climb in your back window. If you need a witness in court, I'll testify. I'll tell a judge exactly what kind of people they are. I looked at this woman who'd been nothing more than a kind neighbor for 4 years, who had no stake in any of this, offering to help simply because it was right. And I thought about how a stranger had to be the one to show my family the truth, and now a near stranger was the only one in my corner. But I hadn't lost. The cops siding with them tonight didn't mean I was trapped. I was going to call a lawyer, and I was going to file. They forced their way into my life. Now they were going to watch me legally carry them out of it. The next morning, I was at the courthouse before it opened, in line with a folder of documents and a calm I hadn't felt in years. I filed the formal eviction at 9 sharp, every form in triplicate, paid a filing fee I'd be eating rice over for a week to recover from, and walked out feeling like I'd fired the first shot in a war I was finally ready to win. The clerk told me the hearing would be in 3 weeks, that they'd be served, and that I should document everything in the meantime. So I documented everything. I bought a cheap doorbell camera and screwed it up myself that evening, while my mother watched from my couch and asked who I thought I was, spending money on toys. I photographed the back window with its broken latch. I saved every voicemail and text from the 3-week siege, printed them, and put them in the folder. I asked Delia to write down what she'd seen, with the date and the time she'd watched 2 people climb through my window, and she did it in careful cursive and signed it. I called Renata. That was the hardest call I've ever made, but she answered like she'd been waiting, and she didn't waste time on small talk. I'm so sorry, she said first, for what he did to you, and for what your family did to you. I found their number trying to find yours. I wanted to warn somebody. She had copies of the texts, the ones where Theo bragged. She had screenshots of him laughing to a friend about how he'd handled me, and about how the in-laws would swear to anything. She sent me all of it. Use whatever you need, she said. I'm getting out too. I've got my own folder. For 3 weeks, I lived with 2 people who had broken into my home, because the law made me. They ate my food and complained about it. They watched my TV and complained about it. My mother rearranged my kitchen and told me my system was illogical. Priya left wet towels on my bathroom floor and asked when I was going to let go of all this anger. I slept with my bedroom door locked and a chair under the handle. And every single day I added something to my folder. Every insult my mother threw, I wrote down with a date. Every time Priya said the word family like a weapon, I logged it. They thought my silence meant I'd given up. It meant I was building a case. The morning of the hearing, my mother came out in her church clothes, the navy dress she wears to look respectable, and Priya had done her hair. They'd dressed for a jury. In the courthouse hallway, they ran the same play they always run, my mother dabbing at dry eyes, telling anyone near us about her cold daughter and the silly misunderstanding. I sat on a bench with my folder and Delia beside me, and I said nothing. When we were called in, the judge was a tired-looking woman in her 60s with reading glasses pushed up on her head. She asked me to state my case. I didn't perform. I just laid it out. This is my lease, my name, my apartment. These 2 people entered through a back window while I was at work, without a key, without an invitation. I asked them to leave, and they refused. I called the police, and they refused. Here's the photo of the broken latch. Here's the footage from the camera I installed, them coming and going from a home they have no right to. Here is a signed statement from my neighbor who watched them climb in. Here are 3 weeks of voicemails and texts demanding I house them. I never invited them. There was never a timeline to dispute. There was only a break-in. My mother went next, and she reached for the performance, the trembling voice, the talk of family and a daughter who'd lost her way. The judge let her finish. Then the judge looked over the top of her glasses and asked one question. "Ma'am, did you enter the apartment through a window?" My mother hesitated. "Well, the door was..." "It's a simple question. Did you climb through a window to get into your daughter's home?" "Yes," my mother said. "But..." "Did your daughter give you a key?" "No, but..." "Did she invite you to stay?" And here Priya, who has never in her life been able to sit inside a silence, jumped in to save them and sank them instead. She knew we needed somewhere. We're her family. We didn't think we needed a formal invitation to... "So she did not invite you," the judge said. "Thank you. That's all I needed." She took off her glasses. She looked at my mother and my sister for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice had gone cold and even. "I've read the statement from the neighbor. I've seen the photographs and the footage. What you're describing is not a family disagreement about a timeline. You entered a residence that wasn't yours, without permission, through a window, and refused to leave when the lawful tenant and then the police asked you to. That is unlawful entry, and I'll be noting it as such. I'm granting the petition for removal. You have until tomorrow at noon to be out, and an officer will be present to enforce it. And I'll add this, off the record and to your faces. This young woman brought a folder. She documented everything calmly, like someone who has learned the hard way that no one was going to take her word for it. I think we can all guess where she learned that." Priya started to say my name. The judge cut her off without looking up. "We're done here." In the hallway after, my mother turned to me with the wet eyes and the trembling chin, the last card she had. "You'd really put your own mother out on the street. After we said we were sorry, after we admitted we were wrong about Theo." I picked up my folder. I thought about a porch at 3 a.m, a broken wrist, a screaming baby, and a deadbolt sliding shut. "You stood on a witness stand," I said, "and you helped a man take my daughter. You knew where she'd sleep at night, and you did it anyway. A stranger had to show you the proof before you'd believe a word I ever said. So no, I won't lose a single hour of sleep over where you sleep tonight." I looked at Priya. "You called me dramatic in a courtroom. You're going to find out exactly how dramatic I'm not." I walked out into the daylight with Delia beside me, and for the first time in years, the air felt like it belonged to me. An officer stood in my doorway at noon the next day while they carried their bags down to the car they'd told the judge they didn't have. My mother didn't look at me. Priya did once on the stairs, and opened her mouth to say something, and I closed my door before the word could come out. I heard the engine turn over in the lot below. I heard them pull away. Then I sat in the quiet of my own apartment, the one I pay for with my own paycheck, in the life I built out of the rubble of the one they helped burn down. My phone buzzed that night, a text from Renata, just one line. "Heard it went your way. Good. We both got out." I saved it. Then I drove across town and picked up Ivy for my Wednesday dinner, and she ran to me at the door, and I held my daughter in my own kitchen with the latch on the back window fixed and bolted, and nobody in the world had a key but me. They told a courtroom I made it all up. A judge just told them, to their faces, that I documented every word. They wanted to talk about family, so I let a judge explain to them what family actually owes. They closed a door on me once with nothing on the other side but the dark. I just returned the favor, with the law holding it shut.